Let's have a look at what's happening in federal politics and the situation in India, the outbreak of the worst day of COVID-19 since the inception of the disease. This is a very important time for India as Australia's Prime Minister Scott Morrison announced a support package yesterday, 500 ventilators, 1 million surgical masks, and 500,000 protective masks and oxygen supplies too. The downside, the government has decided to pause direct flights from India, writes John, until May 15 on our Flow News 24 desk. He says that indirect flights have already been paused by the transit countries, and when flights are resumed, travellers will have to have a negative PCR test as a negative rapid antigen test before uplift, and DFAT will resume charter flights as soon as possible with the objective of getting as many Australians home in the near future. The Prime Minister said that the pause was generated by the number of positive cases in hotel quarantine that originated in India, and this had put quarantine facilities in New South Wales and the Northern Territory under pressure. And look, if you understand what's happening with the Howard Springs situation in the Territory, there are right now 17,000 Australians who are stranded in India. The whole option to bring them home now appears to be closed, given that at Howard Springs you've got about 2,000 returning travellers that could be handled in mid-May. They're trying to actually upgrade the facility to take that number. So you can't put 17,000 people in Howard Springs. You can only put a small amount there that can come back through. And of course, you've got to manage the ones that are COVID positive away from COVID negative cases. Howard Springs Quarantine Facility is dealing with its highest number of positive COVID-19 cases since it began handling repatriation cases last year. It has right now 20 positive cases in the Northern Territory. Its Health Minister is Natasha Files, and they are concerned obviously at the number of cases coming in from India, and one can see the advice that's been taken that we can't obviously repatriate more flights from India at the moment until they get to some kind of equilibrium in the number of beds available and the number of isolation places that we can put people who return. Now, last Wednesday morning, the Australian Medical Association NT President Robert Parker said the National Cabinet should look very seriously at placing a pause on repatriation flights coming to Howard Springs from India. Well, that's exactly what Mark McGowan, the Western Australian Premier, has done, and now following suit, the South Australian Premier Stephen Marshall has done likewise, and this now creates a very interesting situation, the domino effect on international flights. Stephen Marshall not only has barred flights from India but flights from everywhere else, and this then puts more pressure back on Sydney and Melbourne on repatriation flights coming from other locations. And does it create the domino effect? Well, that is the question to be answered. But for the Northern Territory, their Health Minister, Ms Files, said her government had a humanitarian responsibility to repatriate vulnerable Australians and backed the infection control measures at Howard Springs to safely manage the increased positive caseload, which is likely to come in the middle of May as we handle those 2,000 returning travellers through each time the quarantining period that they need to go through. And obviously those that are positive have to be isolated at the Howard Springs facility. Look, it's a good idea that the government put an onshore processing facility at Howard Springs. I think that the mechanisms that the government's put in place actually are working well, but the reality is that you've got Bill Shorten going around saying that we should close all international flights, close them now, close flights from India, then jumping on bandwagon state premiers like Stephen Marshall, who I think is probably, of all the state premiers we've seen so far, seems to take the attitude that the minute there's one case anywhere, we close borders, we close flights, we do everything that Stephen Marshall believes is necessary to shut the rest of the world out. Now, while that may seem like a reasonable suggestion, at one case, 2 cases on, it isn't the position that we can take and should take, given what it does to our economy, what it does to the police forces having to marshal those troops along the borders, and then just simply what it does to the psyche of the society that we're living in. We just need to be able to get some normality into the life of people living around us, and unfortunately the Indian situation is a cumulative effect that in that country, with all the slums and so forth that they are, and the poorer living conditions and sanitisation issues that they still have across 1.4 billion people, then this situation was likely to happen with the infectious nature of COVID-19.